Hello and Happy New Year. Once a year, I like to take a real good look at the previous year's trades to find out what worked well, what didn't work well at all, and what I can improve for the coming year. I like to really get an idea of what I think the market is going to do based upon the history of the market. So this year I thought I would actually go through the process and record it so you could see how I look at the market and how I make decisions about what I might want to or might not want to get into over the next coming year. Overall, each year is different in many regards, but also the same. And I think that really is the significance of what we can see with various assets that we trade on a daily basis. So let's get into it and talk about what I think is going to happen over the next year. We're going to start with XRP. Its most recent traffic and activity has been quite illuminating, particularly since one of its most aggressive supporters won a US election. But overall, when you look at the history of XRP, and I am looking at this on the daily chart using the Range Hunter module from the Jackrabbit TV series. Links will be in the description below. It's part of my Patreon offerings. This breaks down the highest high and the lowest low and gives me a median, that thick black line in the middle. This is basically what I look at in terms of mean reversion or cyclic behavior. Traffic should always be around the black line. That is, this is where traffic is going to always want to go back to. So if the market is below this black line, it's going to want to become reasonably close to it. If the market is above the black line, it's also going to want to be reasonably close to it. This is where your cycles take place in trading and what the market would assume to be a fair market value of the asset. Now that always isn't the case for obvious reasons, and there are simply a lot of cases where a market is just not going to do over well long term above or below a certain range, meaning it's not going to cycle the way we expect it. So in looking at this market, we can clearly see that we don't have a really good cycle all that well. Or do we? We see right here a bit of a year. But at the same time, when we look at the periods by which the market has actually gone bullish, they're not that long, really. They're not the way you would expect a cycle to be. That is, a cycle is going to be a nice curvature where you have a low point and then a high point, but that cycle always returns to the median, or the mean reversion aspect of the instrument we are discussing. In both cases where XRP did exceptionally well, were driven by political events. And those political events are a bit concerning for me. Any asset that can be easily manipulated by a political event, in my personal opinion, is not something I want to trade. I want assets that are market resistant. So for me, XRP would be a no trade. I just don't like trading instruments that are subject to the whims of politicians. But as we look at the market, let me turn this on. We can see by going back that the market has always had very few highlights, and it has had quite a few lowlights, meaning it's not been very much above the median, but it spends quite a bit of time below the median. And anytime it does go above the median, it has a pretty drastic correction afterwards. We see that in the two cases on the screen, where the market corrected dramatically after it crossed the median. So with the third point being no different, and that being the 2024 election range, we can actually see the market already beginning to correct. And I think it is going to correct back down to the median and then return its previous cycles. As we look at this market, we can see it rose quite nicely, nice big bump from the election, but then it started to stagger out. It started to flatline and go stale. I think the market is losing momentum. I think it is going back to what it was in terms of a global asset value, and I think prices are actually going to return down into this level. Maybe not as low, but below the median. I really don't believe this asset is going to hold much value in the context of what it would be over its normal averages. And we can clearly see by looking at the history. Even when you look here, where the market looked like it was going to stay flat for a while, it still started teetering downwards, and then eventually ended up becoming the flat long-term basis that we've spent pretty much a year and a half in, almost 2 years. If you compare that to previous history, and you look at the history here, you see basically the same pattern. Roughly a multi-year flat zone, I guess is the best way to put it. So I really don't see this changing whatsoever for XRP. I know the hype is that XRP is going to $10. It might hit $4 or $5. I don't think it's going to hit $10. And even if it hits $4 or $5, I think that's pushing it. If it gets another big political bump like it got right here, that's all bets are off. Nobody knows what happens with that kind of manipulation. But that's a big concern. If it can be manipulated that much, then it's questionable in terms of the long-term sustainable value the asset is going to have in a trading context. I would recommend extreme care with trading XRP. It's just a difficult asset, and it's something you want to be aware of when you get into this market. It wouldn't be one of my videos unless I talked about Raven. If I'm talking about the market, this is pretty much a guaranteed pain in my backside. This wonderful token, and I'm going to use that very generously, has been a nightmare because it just is flat. It had a steady run. When it first started out, it looked like it had promise, had a nice big uptick, and then it just went straight down. And it's been pretty consistent about that ever since. It hasn't even remotely shown any hope of ever reaching its all-time high since. And I really don't believe it's going to. I think for the rest of the year, it's going to remain pretty consistent where it's at. As much as people might like to believe this asset is going to go back to its all-time high, I just don't see it. I don't even see this asset making its median. I think it's just going to continue in this range which is comfortable for it, and we can see a few times where it actually managed to get into the 20% part of its base range. But I just don't see it getting past that. I think it's going to remain flat for the rest of the year. 2025 is not going to be its year, to be very honest. Cardano, the coin that could be so much and yet has managed to miss the mark in so many ways. It has promise. It could very well be something of a positive value. We see in the very beginning where it made a comfortable stride, it did quite nicely. It had a nice complete correction that did well, and it, well, didn't go anywhere. It remained flat, pretty much like Raven. It got a little political bump here, but I don't think that's going to last. I really don't think it's going to get back to its median either. I think it might remain in the range it's at, maybe drop a little bit, but I really don't see it progressing any further than what it's doing. It's just, I don't know if it's what's going on within the foundation, the people behind it, but it's just a mediocre asset, really. I don't really see it as an appreciable token to want to really get into. If you're familiar with the Brave browser, then you know BAT. Another one that could be so much more than, well, what it is. Flat. It had promise. It really had hope. And then it just petered out and went completely flat. It had more promise than Raven, thanks to Brave. But I don't see this. I don't see a recovery here. I don't see this going back to the days that gave it promise. Like Raven or ADA, that's not to say that they might not be profitable in trading. But I don't see them as a value in holding and really being anything other than a traded token. The thing I do like about BAT that I don't like about ADA or Raven, you don't have much of a bump from the election. The election cycle didn't really affect the asset at all. I like that. I don't like assets that, like XRP, just went ballistic at the election. ADA a little bit, but XRP really just not what I like to see. If something can be manipulated by an event that happens every 4 years, what real world value is it going to have as an investment opportunity? That's just something I don't care to see in my own personal trading. So I do like BAT remaining stable throughout the election cycle. Its consistency is probably its saving grace. And that really is what puts it on the radar for something that I would trade. Just because it at least has a level of consistency that I can rely on with a 2-year consistent history. We can't really talk about forecasting the year unless we talk about Bitcoin. Realistically, Bitcoin is probably the beginning and end of the entire crypto market in one way or another, since it has such a strong market dominance. So realistically, here we are. We can see we just recently hit an all-time high, and now we're going into a corrective stance. Are we going to hit $150,000? I don't know. I don't think it really matters, and I think overall it is just a lot of hype. It does have the cyclic nature that I like. We can see the various cycles taking place. I wouldn't mind it being more consistent around the median, but at least we can clearly see the cyclic nature of the asset. It hits an all-time high, it has a consistent and predictable correction, and then it hits another all-time high. Overall, that is a healthy market. I personally don't like the level that the market is for volatility, but it's a healthy market. Right now, with it being at an all-time high, it's overvalued, in my personal opinion. I personally think it would belong better down at the black range, the median, but overall, it is what it is with Bitcoin. It's a hype coin, but it does have at least some market consistency. Though I do believe that the correction stage isn't over. As we can see from prior events, I think we're going to correct even more. If we look at this area here as an example, we should actually then correct down to this area before it goes back up as a minimum. It may go lower, but realistically I think it's safe to say that this is now due for a rough 25 to 30% correction. So I think prices are going to drop. So in my opinion, another political coin. Its value goes up whenever a politician or a celebrity makes some kind of comment. Not something I would personally get into. Some people like it, but I don't. But it is at least consistent when it's not being politically manipulated within a very reasonable range. That is good. I don't like the political manipulation, as I've mentioned with XRP, and right now that is definitely going on. It's going to die back down. I do see it going back down to this range. I do not see this asset really going any further than what it is for its history. So let's keep looking at other assets. Ethereum. Well, it's done well. It's gone quite nicely and hit an all-time high. It made a correction, but it didn't hit another all-time high. That's not a bad thing by any means, but I think if we look at the way the market has done, I think we can clearly see that we're going to go back down to the median or perhaps below it if we look at its history. It's more cyclic than other cryptocurrencies, and I think that's a good thing for a healthy market. So I wouldn't perceive this to really stay above the median for much longer before it does take a significant correction. Litecoin. It's an interesting asset that has done well recently, but it's not an appreciative one. I don't see its price action really going above what it's done. It does have the possibility to hit back at the median, but I don't see it yet. I don't think it's going to hit an all-time high for a while though. Maybe not even throughout the year. If we look at the history though, we can see where it is at least remaining within its cyclic nature. So the next time it really does begin to run, it very could easily hit a new all-time high. The thing about Litecoin is it doesn't stay in the highs very long. As we look at the screen, we can see both cases where it dropped pretty rapidly after it made its all-time high. That is, after it climbed up, hit that high, people sold it off, and it went right back down to the median. So it's more of a value-based asset, in my opinion, in terms of what it does versus a money-making based asset on the context of its all-time high. It has a service. It's meant to be fast, and it does that well. So I think that's what's going to keep it going and keep it stable. Now let's talk about the Forex markets. I've switched to the weekly mode so that we can look at the entire history of the market, roughly 20 years. And I think this is really an important point as we can really see the long-range perspective of the market. We've gone up, hit an all-time high, and then we've been pretty much on the swing low of it. Will we hit another all-time high? I don't think so. And that's probably not a bad thing given a currency. I think the balance between the euro and the US dollar is critical, and I think if they hover around the median, then it's really important for the benefit of both nations. And I think that really should be said of any pairing that holding around the median offers the best opportunities for everybody. I think when one side is overly slanted, it creates an imbalance that really affects the economies in a negative way. So from my perspective of how I trade, I really don't see this changing. I think the market is going to remain pretty consistent and pretty flat. I think it will go up and down, which if we see on the daily, we can see where it has gone back to the median to some degree. Right in this region here, we're close to the median. Close enough that I think it is reasonably healthy. But then we see that it went back down and it's just been remaining flat ever since. So overall, I think we can tell where the market is and what it's going to do. And of course, in looking at this, we have a myriad of different options for trading. Moving forward for the year, I'm definitely going to continue my floating grid technique. That has really done exceptionally well. Well, exceptionally well up to the point of my database crash. But then once I got back to my roots and started following my own intuition again, with my own database ideologies, well, it did that well again. So, we have the part that I wish didn't exist. The database crash. I wish I could just cut that out. But I can't, so it is what it is. We have stop losses. No big deal. They hurt, but they're supposed to hurt. Overall, though, the technique of the floating grid worked. And I am $30 away from being where I was before my stop losses hit. Now, of course, I'm using the reduction technique, and that has really made a difference in the entire philosophy of the floating grid. I've demonstrated where the floating grid without reductions does work, but I just believe thoroughly with all the testing I've done, 20 some odd demo accounts in fact, that the floating grid clearly shows a process that really works in a genuine, real-world context. I want to finish my forecast and outlook looking at my live account. Right here, right now, picking up when we were talking about the floating grid, we can see what I'm currently holding on the side. My current holdings, and the very bottom being slowly reduced away. We can see what I'm holding on the left for my actual positions, and it just works well. Is it the best technique out there? No. But floating grid and dollar cost averaging have been two of the most successful techniques I have ever used. So for me, the next year is going to be literally continuing with these working maneuvers, these strategies. Dollar cost averaging with opportunistic sells and the floating grid have just done perfect and exceptional. So let me know, how did your year go last year? Did you make a lot? Did you lose a lot? Or did you pretty much stay where you expected? Share your thoughts. I'd like to know how you handled your year of trading. Also, let me know, what do you think this next year is going to be? Do you think that it's going to be flat and basically continue with what it's been doing, like I do? Or do you think that we might see the next big bull run? If you like this video and you got value out of it, please hit that subscribe button and hit the like button so that we can share this kind of information. Thank you for watching, and until next time.